So, good morning. We're holding in the Tractate Menachot, page 70, Amud Ain, the Amdinu Vasrinu, the beginning of the page, where he estimated the ears of grain that he harvested and gave Meiser. He tithed them Veshatlinu, and then replanted them Voisifu lehu, and they increased in size. What is the debate? If you conclude and say, in regards to Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi's inquiry, Lo yazlin bosar ikar, we do not go after the root when doing so results in a leniency. V'sisefes boi asuri, and the increase in growth requires tithing. Ikomai, what about the root itself? Does it need to be retithed or not? Do we have to give Meiser again from it or not? Omar le'Abaye, ma yishno mikol chiti v'sarei de'almo. Why should this case be treated differently than all the other cases of wheat and barley in the world, which are planted after being tithed and yield harvests that must be tithed in their entirety? Here too, then, if the increase does not go after the original root and needs to be tithed, you have to give Meiser. The entire harvest should require tithing, including the original root. Concerning something whose seed decomposes when it grows, such as kernels of wheat and barley, I have no question that the entire harvest requires tithing, since nothing of the original seed remains, and what grows is an entirely new entity. So we had a question that was posed by Ben Pazi, and he says, if I gave Meiser, I gave the tithing that I needed to give, and after giving the tithing, I'm taking the portion that I can eat, that is mine, and I'm replanting it in the ground. So do I deduct from the new harvest that seeds that I planted in the ground? Understand? Because it's already, if you're using 5 tons of seeds, from that 5 tons of seeds that you're going to plant, you already gave Meiser. So why should you count it again? So the Gemara says, 1 second. What happened to the seed? It decomposes. So there's nothing left of it. Then there's no question. The debate is, in a case of the kernels that we mentioned yesterday, that somebody harvested, and let's say before the Omer, and after the Omer he planted it again, and the new growth, is it included or not? So same question we can pose regarding Meiser. Do I have to give Meiser from the new growth of this kernels that grew, or do I have to give Meiser from the whole thing?
Gave.
Right? You already gave. So it says Ela ki mibayele in the right column. Rather, where do I have a question? Dovo she'ein zaroi kole. In the case of something whose seed does not decompose, such as a replanted ear of grain, what is the law in this case? It says in number 7, the note 7, since the original seed is present in the final harvest, and it was tithed, you already gave Meiser from that seed before being replanted, perhaps it does not need to be retithed. And this could be applied even for today. If someone gave a Meiser from his earnings, and he reinvested his earnings in the business, do I have to give money again from this earnings? Tifshut lei, the Gemara says, Tifshut lei. Let us resolve this question, this inquiry. Mehad Omar Rabbi Yitzchak, Omar Rabbi Yochanan. From this, that Rabbi Yitzchak said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Litra batzal shetiknu. Litra, it's a certain amount. Like today we say liter, liter, litra. of untithed onions that one rectified by separating its teruma and meiser. So when he rectifying it, he made it permissible by putting it aside. Uzroi, and then replanted. Mitaser lefi kulei, is tithing according to its entirety. The percentage separated for teruma and meiser are calculated against the entire new crop, which consists of both the original litra and the new growth. Now, an onion does not decompose when planted, but expands and increases in size. Okay? This ruling clearly demonstrates that where the root does not decompose, it requires tithing after having been replanted and growing. The Gemara rejects this proof. Also, there, in the case of onions, replanting is its ordinary method of planting. That's the regular way of doing it. Where here, in the case of ears of grain, replanting is not its ordinary method of planting. It says in number 12, in the note, grain is customarily grown from seed, not replanted ears. Therefore, if an ear of grain is replanted and grows further, the root may be considered significant in its own right and not assume the status of the increase. The case of the onions can therefore not serve as a precedent for this case. Amar le Rabbi Chanina bar Manyumi le'Abaye. Rabbi Chanina bar Manyumi said to Abaye, Atzit she'ino nakuv ma'u. With regards to grain grown in non-perforated flower pot. Perforated flower pot means that it has holes in the bottom. Non-perforated means it's closed. Atzit she'ino nakuv ma'u. What is the law? Can it be tithe, meaning you have to give meiser from grain grown in another non-perforated flower pot? If you look at note 13, it says, Rashi, produce is not biblically subject to the laws of teruma. The laws of teruma and meiser, unless it is nourished at least to some extent by the ground of Eretz Israel.
What is nourished?
Getting its life, nourishment, getting its chayut, is vitality. But, so when do you have to give meiser from produce? If it's planted in Eretz Israel. Now, today they have all this new way of growing, or they grow up in the air.
Yeah.
They can grow on the table. They have plants that are not connected to the ground, and they grow. One of the new things they did in Israel, in the Arava, in a place where it's desert, you can't grow there anything. It's like a beach sand. They created greenhouses, and inside those greenhouses they have tables, and on the tables there's pots, and they're growing many things on it. And today you can floors of creating many growth of vegetations. So produce grown in a flower pot is therefore not biblically subject to tithing. You don't have to do tithing. You grew up in a flower pot, non-perforated, unless the pot is perforated, unless there is holes, so that nourishment from the earth can reach the plant through the hole in that pot. If you take a pot, a flower pot with holes, and you put it on the ground, you'll see after a while that it's attached to the ground because the roots went through the holes. Yeah. They found their way and attached themselves to the ground.
In the concrete, if you have a crack,
it will go through.
It grows something.
It grows through.
On the street, on the asphalt.
Right,
if there is a little crack, you can see grass is coming up.
Correct.
It's amazing.
So the Shita Mekubetzet over here writes, notes that Rashi's reading the Gemara stated explicitly that the question was Atzit she'eno nakuv milo nakuv ma'u, a non-perforated flower pot that was tithed, someone gave meiser from another non-perforated flower pot, what is the law? That's another question. If the flower pot whose grain is being tithed is non-perforated, what is the problem? Lo naku, it is not perforated. Its tithing obligation is also not biblical. It's not according to the Torah, you don't have to give meiser. Why then should meiser taken from it, from another non-perforated flower pot, not be effective? Dilma chazar unekavo kamot. Do you perhaps mean to say, what is the law in a case where one returned and perforated the pot? So originally the pot had no holes, but then someone came and created holes in the pot. After grain began growing, and it then continued to grow afterwards. So your question is really whether that grain can later be tithed from within itself. This question returns on whether what grew before the perforation, the root, retains its own exempt status, or whether it assumes the tithing obligation of the increase. In essence, you mean to ask the same question asked by Rava above, merely in regards to a different law, however, is not really correct, as Abaye proceeds to explain. Where he perforated the pot, while the grain in it was growing, it is in effect one long planting. And at the same time, and at the time of perforation, it becomes attached to the ground and sprouts further. Penetrates through and it grows. Now the roots are connected to the ground. For this reason, we may surely judge the root and the increase to be one entity, with the root taking on the status of the increase and becoming subject to tithing like it. The Gemara says, Hossam. However, there, in Rava's case of the replanted ears of grain, Shtei zeriot ninu. We're dealing with two types of plantings, two separate plantings of grain. Rava rightly asks whether the growth that occurred in the first planting should lose its status and assume that of the increase which came from the second planting. The Gemara presents another inquiry by Rabbi Abau, Shibolet, concerning an ear of grain still attached to the stalk.
What is stalk?
To the main
Okay,
shaft, the big piece. Concerning an ear of grain still attached to the stalk, shemeracho bakri, the one smoothed in the pile after harvesting, ushasolo, and he then replanted it, v'koro leo sheim b'mechubo, and declared it to be teruma while it was attached to the ground. Now, what is the law? Is it or is it not teruma? What was the case over here? Shemiracho b'kri, he was smoothing it in the pile after harvesting, and then he replanted it again and declared it to be teruma while it was attached to the ground. Once he smoothed the grain, he made it into tevel. Tevel is questionable if the meiser was given or teruma was taken or not. That is to say, he caused it to become liable to teruma, since it was liable to teruma before it was replanted. Kikor lo shem kodesh Allah. It stands to reason that when he declared it teruma, he indeed consecrated it as such, or idilma, or perhaps kevan the shesolo, since afterward he planted it, its stable status left it, so that when he later declared the teruma, the designation did not take effect. It says in 21, note 21, ordinarily produce that is still attached to the ground cannot become teruma. For the verse describes teruma, reishis de goncho, the first of your gathered grain, which teaches that teruma may not be taken until the produce is gathered and the pile established. Mechubor eino chayov. Anything that is attached is not falling under the category of being obligated for teruma. Before that point, the teruma obligation does not take effect. In other words, the grain has not yet become tevel with regard to teruma. What is tevel? I'm not sure if teruma was taken. It is only with the smoothing that the grain tevel status and becomes obligated in teruma and maisa. Obviously, a grain that is still attached to the ground has not undergone smoothing, therefore it is not fit for teruma. Rabban says to Abaye, if so, we find teruma, we found a case that designated teruma that was designated while attached to the ground. We learned this rule that teruma, you can't find teruma that is attached to the ground. In regards to what was the Mishnah taught, with regards to one who deliberately eats teruma, becoming liable to death at the hands of heaven. And with regards to one who inadvertently eats teruma, paying the penalty of an additional fifth. The Mishnah is teaching that a person cannot become liable to these penalties by eating teruma that is attached to the ground. He's only become liable to teruma if it's detached from the ground. If he does it intentionally, liable to chorus, heavenly death. And if he does it inadvertently, he has to bring fifth. He has to add fifth to what he ate. The tolish v'ochil, if one first picks the grain and then eats it, tolushu, it is detached. Ve'gochin v'ochil, if one bends over and eat it while it is attached, this is not a legally significant act of eating, and so does not render him liable to the penalty described above, because we said it doesn't get full. It's not considered full-fledged teruma if it's connected to the ground. Why? What's the problem with teruma? Teruma is something that was designated to the Kohen, and if it has it's consecrated and becomes holy. And if a regular person eats it, it's a problem, right? So Botlo Daitetze Kolodom, his view of what is considered eating is negated by the view of all the other people. How many people would bend down and eat from the ground? Imagine a plant of tomatoes. Somebody bends down and eats the tomatoes while they're still connected to the ground. It's not common. That's why it says his view of what is considered eating is negated by the view of all the other people. And why is this different from that which was written in Ilfa ledger? Ilfa's ledger, it says in 25, Ilfa was a colleague of Rabbi Yochanan. Regarding eggs from the unslaughtered carcass of a kosher bird. Mikzosim b'chutz, mikzosim b'fnim. Some of which are outside the bird and some which are still within the bird. Mibifnim metamim begodim abeisa bria. The eggs that are within the bird, they like the bird itself and contaminate a person's clothing while they are in his throat. Mibachutz, the eggs that are outside the bird, ein metamim begodim abeisa bria. They do not contaminate a person's clothing while they are in his throat. Let's look at 26. Nevela is the carcass of an animal or bird that was not slaughtered in the prescribed manner. The nevela of a kosher bird is tameh. However, unlike other sources of tumah, other sources of impurity, it does not transmit tumah to one who touches it or carries it. Instead, it conveys tumah to one who eats it, who in turn contaminates the clothes he is wearing at that time. So it's a lower level of impurity, and you can touch a dead carcass, but if you eat the dead carcass, then you become, besides the prohibition of not eating nevela, an animal that was not slaughtered in the prescribed manner, but you becoming tameh to such degree that it contaminates your clothes as well. Ilfa was discussing a kosher bird that was in the process of laying eggs when it died. Some of the eggs had already left its body, others were still inside at the moment of death. What is the question? Are the eggs regarded as part of the bird's flesh, and is so far being able to contaminate one who eats them, or they are not? If I eat those eggs that are inside the stomach of the bird, the dead bird, the nevela, it's going to contaminate my clothes or not?
Maybe it's the same part, the same as the animal.
So if it's the same as the animal, then it should contaminate the clothes, the one who eats it. And if it's not, then it shouldn't. That's the debate.
Only if it's not killed kosher.
Yeah. Gemara says, a base of Leah. So the case of eggs within the bird concerns one who puts his mouth into the bird's abdominal cavity and consumes the eggs. Although this is not the manner in which people normally consume eggs, the person is still deemed to have performed a legally significant act of eating. Likewise, in the case of one who eats grain that is attached to the ground, the original case that we mentioned, although it differs from the normal manner of eating, it should nevertheless be regarded as an act of eating. Bottom line, he ate. This contradicts the assertion of Abaye. The Gemara differentiates between the case of eggs and the case of grain. Tolush, when food is detached from the ground, as in the case of the eggs. Avide inshe de'ach le'achi. It is customary for people to eat in this manner. Therefore, the person's consumption of the eggs inside the bird is deemed a legally significant act of eating. But when food is attached to the ground, as in the case of the grain, lo yavide inshe de'ochli. It is not customary for people to eat in this manner. Therefore, a person's consumption of grain that is attached to the ground is not deemed a legally significant act of eating.
It's not a living like a creature. It's not the only aspect of the difference between a live animal with soul and a...
No, over here they're differentiating between attached grain to the ground and eggs. Eggs we always eat detached from the ground. So he says, when it comes to eggs, I understand why it will convey tumah, because that's the manner of eating. Even though it's not exactly the way of eating, because he ate it directly from the bird. They opened the abdominal, and how it's described that he ate it. But with grain, no one's is eating like this, bending down and pulling a grain with his mouth from the ground.
Like a behemoth.
So therefore it shouldn't be considered eating. Amar Rav Tavyume bar Kisna or Shmuel, Rav Tavyume bar Kisna said in the name of Shmuel, Azeirea kelim be'otzit she'enu nokum, one who plants kilaim in a non-perforated pot. So he's planting two different species of grain in a non-perforated pot. So it's never going to be connected to the ground. It is prohibited under rabbinic law.
But kilaim on the soil.
Kilaim is directly to the soil. That's a biblical law, but this is off the ground.
It's not okay. Also.
It's not okay rabbinically, not biblically.
Why the rabbinically? Right? It's not okay.
Kilaim is a mixture of different varieties of seeds or plants. In our case, a person mixed different species of seeds in a non-perforated pot. By biblical law, seeds sown in a non-perforated pot are not considered to be planted, since they are not connected to the ground. So it's not considered planting, according to biblical law, and therefore not included in the kilaim prohibition. Therefore, Rav Tavyume speaks of a rabbinic prohibition. Chazon Ish, Kilaim 13:16, writes that Rav Tavyume also intends a case in which one placed a non-perforated pot into a field containing one species of plant and seeded the pot with another species. Or where he placed two pots next to each other and planted each a different species of plant. Two pots, and each one he puts something else.
It's not mixed.
See there for discussion of how close the pots and plants must be to one another.
It's not mixed.
See how tzvi for various distinctions between different types of plants.
But the plants can mix each other.
Oh, right, well, you're not supposed to mix.
Right. But the issue is
The soil.
The separate pot doesn't really make it.
maybe if the roots are now coming and meeting each
Right,
other.
right, I got it. That's what would be a problem.
So it's not a midoraita. It's not. It's
It's a
okay
separate plot. Separate plot.
to planting a pot.
If you grow
Yeah,
in a garden,
it seems like, but no, but over here we're speaking about non-perforated,
Right.
so the roots didn't go anywhere.
Non-perforated.
The roots are all contained in one place. So biblically it's not even considered planting.
yeah.
Oh.
That's how these grow houses get away with it.
No, but grow house is not necessarily planting kilaim.
They don't mix either. They have them on the table. or
Right,
they have-
if they're making green leaves, they're making green leaves. They're not trying to create another species that doesn't exist.
Okay.
The pushka is under the stender over there. I was looking for the pushka.
Yeah.
So, Amar to me, Barkisna or Shmuel, Azor Kilaim Botsi Shinanokuv, someone plants Kilaim in a non-perforated pot, also it is prohibited under rabbinic law. Amar Abai, Bishlama Iyashmin and Leike Makas Mardus Mderabon Shapir. It would be well if Rav Tavyume is informing us that this transgressor receives lashes for rebelliousness under rabbinical edict. A rabbinical edict of you shouldn't do it, and he did it. Question is if he gets Marcus. Ella also, but if he is simply stating that the act is prohibited, Maika Mashman, what is he stating? What is he informing us? The Midrabbanan Haviz Ria, he is telling us that under rabbinic law it is considered planting. Tanina, but this has already been taught. Torah Misheina Noku V'la Noku, Teruma. If one separated teruma from produce grown in a non-perforated pot, upon produce grown in a perforated pot, because you might say, hey, this is not considered planting. But he did. He gave Maisa. He has two pots. One of them was growing tomatoes and the other was growing tomatoes. One was perforated and one was not. And he gave teruma one on the other. It's considered teruma. However, he must again separate teruma upon the produce of the perforated pot, to fulfill its biblical obligation.
On both. He has to give to one on both.
Specifically the perforated. It says the of the perforated part to fulfill the biblical obligation, because on the non-perforated it doesn't have a biblical obligation. The teruma status of the produce of non-perforated pot tells us that under rabbinic law, the produce of such a pot is considered to have been planted. And this is known from the Mishnah. It cannot be the purpose of Avtaviuma's statement. Perforce Avtaviuma purpose to inform us that one who planted kilaim in a non-perforated pot is liable to rabbinic clashes for rebelliousness. That's the teaching of Rav Tavyumi. The Mishnah, new Mishnah. The Mishnah teaches various laws regarding Chodosh produce. It's called Chadash. Its first ruling, however, concerns the law of Challah. So we'll start with Challah, apropos to our time, Friday, getting ready for Shabbat. We'll learn about Challah. Achitin, wheat, והשעורין, barley, והכוסמין, spelt, והשיבולת שועל, oats, והשיפון, and rye, הרי אלו חייבים בחלה. These grains are subject to the challah obligation. So if you are gluten-free and your wife is making you challah out of oats, or challah out of spelt, or rye challah, or barley challah, I think barley is also gluten. I think barley is gluten also. But let's say she makes spelt, oats, or rye. These grains are subject to the challah obligation. You also have to give a challah. When I say give chayovim b'challah, they're under the challah obligation. It means that you have to separate a piece of the dough, put it aside. Ultimately, we burn it.
While it's in the oven or before you put it in the oven?
Before.
While he's doing the...
You burn it. You burn it on
Look at 38. Look at 38. Whenever one prepares dough, a portion known as challah must be given to the Kohen. The Mishnah teaches that the challah obligation applies only to dough made of flour milled from one of 5 species of grain, wheat, barley, spelt, oats, and rye.
You burn it on a flame? You have to burn it on an open flame? Or you
No, you can put it in my wife puts it in a silver foil,
and
then she puts it in the oven. That's it.
Then you put it in the trash.
You don't have to keep it.
Umitztarfin ze im ze, and they combine with one another with regards to this obligation. So 39 says, dough is liable to the challah tithe only if it was made with at least 1 1/4 of kabin. Remember we learned 43 eggs and 1/5 of an egg. So the Mishnah rules that the different species of grain combine to form this minimum. To 1 1/2 kabin may contain several of the 5 species of grain. The Gemara will elaborate further on this matter. V'asurim b'chodosh milifnei Pesach or milifnei ha'omer, and they are forbidden under the law of chodosh to be consumed before the omer. U'miliktzor milifnei ha'Pesach, or to be harvested before the Pesach festival. If they, any of the 5 species of grain, took root before the Omer, ha'omer matiron, the Omer renders them permitted. Ve'im lav, but if they did not take root before the Omer, Asurin ad sheyovoi ha'omer. Ad sheyovoi ha'omer habo. They are forbidden until the next Omer comes. The Gemara cites a Braita that separates the 5 grains into 2 groups. Tano, Braita is taught, Kusmin, min, chitim, spelt is a species of wheat. Shiboilus, shual, veshifa, min, oats and rye are species of barley. The Gemara identifies the 3 sub-species spelt oats and rye by their Aramaic names. Kusmin spelt gulba. So spelt in Aramaic is called gulba. Shifon dishra. Rye, shifon, is dishra. Shiboles shual, shibole talo. Oats, which in Hebrew is shibolet shual, are called shibole talo in Aramaic. The Mishnah stated that these 5 species of grain are subject to the law of challah. The Gemara draws an inference. Hanei ein. This implies that these 5 grains, yes, they are subject to challah and combine with one another with regard to challah. Oirez v'doichan loy. Rice and millet, no, they are not subject to challah altogether. Menan mile, from where is this derived? Amarish Lakish asyo lechem imatzo. It is derived through the Gezerah Shava, through scriptural analogy from challah. I'm sorry, from matzah.
So that was
Of
a
bread.
bread. Pesach, they'll eat rice. Sfardim, not Ashkenaz, they eat rice because it's not considered a grain. Like mizanot, doesn't go up like a grain. Like
It's
they're allowed
not.
to eat
It's
rice.
not one of the 5 species of grain.
So it doesn't fall in, but Ashkenaz communities, they don't eat rice during the Pesach.
It's also the debate on rice. What is the bracha that needs to be said on rice?
Mizanot, no?
Well, there's the opinions the same as the no. There's
It's just
opinion,
big, no?
but if you see how it grows in water.
Right, so it's
Like-
like with the reed,
Yeah.
like we're learning
Yeah.
about grain. That's why you would think it might mistaken it for a grain back a couple thousand years ago. They might think it was a grain, rice. No?
Today, in order to, if you want to make sure that you're not, you're doing it 100%, you can eat something that is mezonot for sure, and then you have the rice. So if you eat a piece of cake that is mezonot, and then you have in mind to eat the rice. But some say it's adama, because it's coming from the ground.
Didn't even think of that. Adama.
I do mezonot.
I could be saying the bracha wrong the whole time. I had no clue.
No, but I think the prevailing
What do you do?
the prevailing opinion is to mezonot.
Mizanot.
But I try to eat maybe a cookie or a piece of cracker that it's mezonot, and then you can eat the rice. Or you eat it in a meal. You wash your hands for motzi, and then you can eat it. You don't have to say any bracha on it, because you already washed for motzi.
So we'll do Shabbat here in the shul. The rabbi will do a bracha over the wine. He's saying Kaddish for everyone, and then he does mizanot, and then he sits down, whatever, and he goes home and he also goes and does a meal.
Yeah, he washes. It comes to the house. He makes kiddush for his
So
family.
I can do Kiddush, that's what I've been doing, but I didn't know if I was doing it
Yeah,
right.
no.
You know?
No, he makes the kiddush for his family, and that's it. Omar Rish Lakish asya lechem imatzo. It is derived through the Gezerah Shabbos, through scriptural analogy, bread from the law of matzah. Ksiva acho, it's written here regarding the chal obligation. V'oyo be'och lechem. V'oyo be'acholchem lechem oretz. It shall be when you eat from the bread of the land. Uksiv also, it is written there regarding the mitzvah of eating matzah on Pesach. Lechem oini, the bread of affliction. The shared terminology indicates an analogy between these 2 matters. Accordingly, just as the obligation to eat matzah can be fulfilled only with matzah made of one of these species, one of these 5 species, so too does the chala obligation apply only to bread made of one of these 5 species. V'osam gufa minala, and in the case itself, in the case of matzah, how do we know that it must be made one of these 5 species? Amar Rish Lakish v'chiton devei Rabbi Shmuel v'chein tono devei Rabbi Shmuel. And so it was taught in the academy of Rabbi Shmuel, v'chein tono devei Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. And so it was taught in the academy of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Omar Kro, the verse states, with regards to the Pesach offering, Lo yisoichal olav chometz shivas yomim, toichal olav matzos lechem oini. You should not eat leaven with it for 7 days, and you shall eat with it matzah, the bread of affliction. The juxtaposition of leaven and matzah teaches devorim aboim lidei chimutz, that it is only things that can come to leavening. Odam yoytze bo nidei chavos b'Pesach. A person can fulfill his obligation to eat matzah on Pesach because they have the capability of becoming leaven. Yotzu elu, excluded then these rice and flour and millet flour, she'ein bo lidei chimutz, which cannot come to leavening, ela lidei sirchoin, but only to spoilage. We see that only these 5 grains of the Mishnah may be used for matzah. The Gezer Shava teaches that the same is true with regards to the challah obligation. It applies only to dough made of these 5 species of grain. Umistafin zeim zeh.
Can I ask a question about the rice?
Sure.
So they saying you with the white rice you say mezonot and borin for short. Why it's not lamechia?
Right.
Before, if you put it on the screen before.
1 second, before eating this white rice, my name is not. I think when it comes to white rice, it goes through so much processing.
Like bleaching.
Yeah,
So
bleaching
it's not like
and
a
so
brown
on.
rice,
Because
like a
it's
natural rice.
rice, if it's grains,
That's what we just learned, that it's
Yeah.
not considered a grain.
it's a
But
normal.
but a brown rice would also be awesome.
So
because
here it
it's not
says
gonna be any
fresh, not dried, raw rice,
different.
brown
Right. Brown rice.
or white, but it's raw. Borei pri adama. For cooked.
Cook it.
See, white rice or
Change
brown rice also see. Yeah. Allah Zbachu. That's why I said that the whole thing of rice, it's not so clear of what some say Borei pri adama.
They always
Some
make
say
jokes.
mezonot.
I can have rice.
I
I
go
can
on-
eat rice. They
No,
always
but
make
it's
like
not.
they can have whatever they want.
No, not. He's not talking general.
I know.
Not in general. What the bracha that you sound like.
It's a lamechia.
They eat it.
With meat, rice, we don't
That's
make
why. That's why he said in order to not to have this issue, if you eat a cracker, then you for sure say ala michya. If you say mezonot, you can say ala michya.
So you already said it for the rice, even if it's other.
That's fine. So it says orez v'dochan lo, and rice and millet. We're not mentioning rice and millet. Shein boin ledechimutz ela desircha, because they cannot come to leavening, rather to spoilage. If they are, I guess, close to water or in water for too long. It says in number 7, rice or millet dough is left to stand after the kneading, it becomes spoiled. Although these doughs will expand, this indicates not leavening but spoilage. The expansion of it would be indication of spoilage, not leavening. And they combined with one another with regards to the challah obligation. Tana, Baisa taught, is unmilled kernels of grain. Flour and dough, mistarfin zeim zeh, combined with one another. Ma'ilchita, with regards to what law does the Baita state is ruling? Amarav kana linyan chodosh, with regards to the law of chodosh. One who consumes an olive-sized measure of these different types of food, before the omer is offered is liable to lashes. Of Yosef Omar Le'inyan Chometz Pesach, with regards to the law of Chometz on Pesach, one who consumes an olive's volume of these different types of food in a Chometz state on Pesach is liable to chorus. Of Papa Omali and Maisa Sheni, the Brisa was stated with regards to the law of Maisa Sheni. The Ochile Chutz L'Chaymo, it teaches that if one eats a combination of grain, flour, or dough of Maisa Sheni equal in volume to an olive outside the wall of Yerushalayim, Loke, he receives lashes. Maisa Sheni was the second Maisa that was given from it's called Maisa Sheni, the second Maisa. It was given by a farmer that after he gave to Ruma, after he gave to the Levi 10%, he would also take another 10% and that would be his, but he has to eat it in Yerushalayim. Rava Omar Inyan Tumas Ochli. With regards to the law of Tuma of foods, contaminated food, it teaches that these impurity of food, it teaches that these items combine to form the egg volume needed for food Tuma. And the Brisa is coming to inform us of these. This svua ukmochin dumya devatzekus. With regard to Tuma, the law of grain and flour is like that of dough. Ma hosam, just as there in the case of dough. The law of Tuma requires uchla be'einei, a full egg volume of unadulterated food. Av hachanami, so to here as well, in the case of grain and flour, the law of Tuma requires uchla be'einei, a full egg volume of unadulterated food. This excludes the husks that enclose the kernels of barley and the bran in barley flour, which are not considered food and so do not contribute to the requisite egg volume. In other words, it has to be a pure egg volume without any waste. The Gemara supports Rava's interpretation, V'atanya, and as we learned in a Braita, Chita, a kernel of wheat, bein kelufa, bein she'ena kelufa, whether it is peeled or whether it is not peeled, mitztarefes, combines with other foods to form the egg volume needed for Tuma of food. The husks of wheat kernels are fit for consumption, therefore even unpeeled kernels count toward the egg volume. Se'oiro, but a kernel of barley, kelufa, if it is peeled mitztarefes, it combines to form an egg volume. She'ena kelufa, ein mitztarefet. If it is not peeled, it does not combine to form an egg volume. The husks of barley kernels are not fit for consumption, therefore they do not count toward the egg volume. In order for it to be counted, it has to be edible. We see from this brisa that barley husks do not contribute to the egg volume needed for Tuma of food. This supports Rava's interpretation of the earlier brisa. The Gemara questions this ruling. Eini v'otan devei Rabbi Shmuel. It was taught in the academy of Rabbi Shmuel. When speaking of seeds that are subject to Tuma of food, the Torah describes them in this manner: Al kol zera zerua asher zorea. Upon any edible seeds that are plantable. The phrase that are plantable includes even seeds. Keder shebnei odom mitzin ezrio chito bekliposo seiro bekliposo adoshim bekliposon. In the state which people take them out for planting. When it's wheat, in its husk, barley in its husk, lentils in their husks,
What's this?
the covering of it.
The shell.
This Baita states that kernels of barley are susceptible to tumor contamination even while in their husks.
You see corn, when you have to peel, it's called husk.
Although the husks are not themselves food, they are protectors of food. The kernels, and so combine with kernels with regards, i.e. the kernels, and so combine with kernels with regards to tumor of food. This contradicts the previous price. The Gemara resolves the contradiction. Lo yikashio abe lachois habe evashos. This one, the later brisa, is speaking in the case of moist barley husks. These husks are indeed the protectors of the corn, of the kernels. Therefore, they combine with the kernels with regards to tumah. This one, however, the earlier brisa is speaking in the case of dried out barley husks. These husks do not protect the kernels, but simply wither and fall away. Therefore, they are not regarded as protectors of the kernels, and so do not combine with the kernels with regards to tumah. The Mishnah stated, "V'asurim bechodosh milifnei Pesach or milifnei Omer," and they are forbidden under the law of Chodosh to be consumed before the Omer. The Gemara seeks a source for this ruling. From where are these words known? Amar Reish Lakish, Asir lechem lechem imatzo. There is a Gezerah Shava. This is derived by means of Gezerah Shava, scriptural analogy of bread from the law of matzah. V'liktzor lifnei Omer Pesach, or v'liktzor lifnei Pesach, or to be harvested before the Pesach festival. The Gemara inquires into the source of this ruling. Minan milei. From where are these words known? Omar Rabbi Yochanan said, Asir reishis mechalo. This is derived by means of Gezerah Shava, first from the law of Chala. The Gemara examines the Mishnah's ruling concerning the prohibition against consuming chodesh prior to the Omer. Ma'i koydem l'Omer. What is meant by before the Omer offering? Until what point in the Omer process it is prohibited to consume chodesh? The Gemara cites a dispute. Rabbi Yoina Omar. Rabbi Yoina said, Koydem ketziras Omer. It means before the harvesting of the Omer. According to Rabbi Yoina, chodesh is prohibited for consumption only until the Omer is harvested.
Before the harvesting, huh?
Yeah, it says, according to Rabbi Yonah, chodesh is prohibited for consumption only until the Omer is harvested. Rabbi Yonah holds, look at 27. Rabbi Yonah holds that once the Omer is harvested, on the night of the 16th of Nisan, we are permitted to consume chadash with dawning of day, meaning it's sunset.
It's a new day.
Hmm?
At the end of the day.
The end of the day, sunset. One need not wait until the offering is actually burnt upon the altar later that day. This coincides with the view of Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish on 68a, that even while the temple stood, Chodesh was permitted at dawn on the 16th. Tosfos points out that Rabbi Yonah did not say before dawn on the 16th. He said before the harvesting of the Omer offering. If he meant dawn, he should have said so explicitly. For this and other reasons, Tosfos rejects Rashi's interpretation of the Gemara and instead embrace a different understanding altogether. However, Chidush HaRashba explained that when Rabbi Yoina said before the harvesting, he meant the period of harvesting, which is the entire night of the 16th. Thus, the permit takes effect at dawn. Rabbi Yosi bar Zavdo Omar Koidem Avos HaOmer. Before the bringing of the Omer, according to his view, Chodosh remains prohibited for consumption until the offering is actually brought in the temple. Tanan Asurim b'Chodosh Lifnei HaOmer. They are forbidden under the law of Chodosh to be consumed before the Omer, v'liktzor lifnei Pesach, or to be harvested before the Pesach. According to the one who says that the Mishnah means before the bringing of the Omer, which is Rabbi Yosi bar Zavdo, all is well. For this, the different times of permissibility is why the Mishnah did not combine the two clauses of consumption and harvesting and teach them as one. But according to the one who says, before the harvesting of the Omer, let the Mishnah combine these clauses and teach them as one in the following manner. They are forbidden under the law of Chodosh to be harvested or consumed before the Pesach festival. The fact that the Mishnah does not combine the clauses would seem to refute Rabbi Yona's view. Ela itmar aseifa itmar. Rather, if this dispute was stated, it was stated in reference to the Mishnah's final ruling. Im ishrishu koidem la'omer, if they took root before the Omer, ha'omer matir, and the Omer renders them permissible. It was regarding this ruling that we asked, Mai koidem la'omer, what is meant by before the Omer? At what point of the Omer process need the plant have taken root? Rabbi Yoina Omar, koidem avas Omer, it means before the bringing of the Omer that the plant need to take root. According to Rabbi Yonah, the grain need only to take root before the Omer offering is brought. Rabbi Yosi bar Zavdo said, Koidem ketziras Omer, before the harvesting of the Omer. According to his view, the grain must take root before the offering is harvested. It says in 32, it's a long discussion, but just read part of it. According to the Gemara's answer, both Rabbi Yonah and Rabbi Yosi bar Zavdo agree that the permit to harvest the new grain comes with the reaping of the Omer, with the harvesting of the Omer, while the permit to consume the new grain comes with the bringing of the Omer in the temple, as was demonstrated in the previous Gemara. They agree as well that the permit to harvest takes effect only on grain that took root before the Omer was harvested. They reason that since the harvesting permit is contingent on the harvesting of the Omer, logic dictates that the seed must take root before that time. They disagree, however, concerning the point at which the grain must have taken root in order to be permitted for consumption. Rabbi Yonah holds that as long as it took root before the Omer was brought in the temple, the Omer permits it. He reasons that since it is bringing the offering that permits the grain for consumption, the grain need not to take root until then. But Rabbi Yosi bar Zavda holds that the new grain is permitted for consumption only if it took root before the harvesting of the Omer. He maintains that although the permit to consume takes effect primarily through the bringing of the Omer, the permit is actually a protracted process, beginning with the harvesting of the Omer and ending with its offering. Since the harvesting marks the beginning of the permit to consume, the seed must be rooted before the harvesting takes place. Omerle, the Mishnah rules that inclusion of a plant in the Omer permits depends upon when it took root. The Mishnah rules that inclusion of a plant in the Omer permit depends upon when it took root. The Gemara seeks the source of this ruling. Omar le Rabbi Lozo, le Rabbi Yoshaya Didei, le Rabbi Yoshaya the Dorei, Rabbi Yoshaya of his generation, lo teitav akar oich akoaich adam forashat le'amas nisin. Do not sit down until you explain this Mishnah to me. Menayin lo imer shematir b'ashosha. From where do we know that the Omer permits new grain that has taken root but has not grown at all? And we'll continue, God willing, on Shabbat.